Okay, well, hi, welcome to Module 12, Dysarthria treatment. Um, I am excited for this module. I'm excited to get into how do we provide treatment, right? So remembering that for dysarthria, we're dealing with a neurological impairment, right? There is some kind of damage that is neurological. So we know that it's not something we're fixing, right? So last module, we were identifying what is the type of dysarthria. And now we're going into what do you do about it? How do we teach compensatory strategies for the client, right? At the end of the day, how do we make this easier? How do we make it more efficient, more effective? And it doesn't only mean for the client, it means for their family too, the people that they interact with. One of the big things is we know that when a person has a neurological disorder, it not only impacts them, but the people around them as well, their caregivers. And them. The communication is so important. Imagine being able to not being able to communicate. Like that is one of the hardest things overall to not be able to say your thoughts. Um, so what we're doing is we're teaching compensatory strategies, understanding that you are not changing, fixing, the word fixing, a neurological impairment, right? And if any of you have done courses with fluency disorders or stuttering, right, it's very similar. We're teaching compensatory strategies in order to improve quality of life, quality of communication overall. So compensatory strategies, you're not fixing, you're not trying to fix. So overall, how do we do this, right? We have behavioral modification, we have prosthetic devices, and then assistive technology. Um, I'll start with behavioral modification. So with this, we have some targets, right? Overall, we want to emphasize our speech, right? So we're over articulating. If you see me say some harder words, especially with R's in them, I always slow down and go a little bit louder, right? And it's applying the same concept as LSVT to my articulation. So emphasizing over articulation. You want to increase volume, right? When you increase volume, you're going to automatically over articulate, right? If you try and talk loud and fast at the same time, this does not work. If you go too fast, your volume is going to decrease. If you go loud, your rate of speech will decrease. Um, and then slow your rate. So we're really looking for loud, slow, clear speech in order to improve. Um, so with this, there's a couple of different ways that we can do some behavioral modification. I will say the most popular is LSVT. LSVT is Lee Silverman voice therapy. It is so cool. I think it's so interesting. And interesting that we're talking about the biggest thing we're saying is talk loud, think loud, be loud and big, right? So LSVT doesn't only go with voice. There's LSVT loud and there's LSVT big. Big would be working more towards your movements. LSVT loud is working more with your voice, right? And your communication piece. Um, so LSVT, so um, I pulled up the LSVT website because I wanted to see a little bit more about it, right? I've learned about this a ton. I've used it before in practice, but I wanted to look at it. I think the LSVT website is so cool. It really works through a lot of different areas. But one of the things that I thought it was cool is they talk about their research, right? And remembering as clinicians, evidence-based practice is so important. So I just want to read this one part. While LSVT loud treatment has helped people in all stages of Parkinson's disease, the majority of research has been done on those in moderate stages of the disease, right? So we're not saying it's not for every patient, but that moderate population is where you're going to find the most efficient, the where the LSVT treatment works the best so far from research. Um, and then the other thing that I thought was really cool with that is it's shown promise recently for adults with speech issues arising from stroke, or MS, which is most multiple sclerosis, and children with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, right? So they're taking a concept that worked for one population, and now we're saying, okay, well, who else can this work with, right? Which is one of the reasons why research is so important because we know it can help maybe other people. And I think that's really cool. So I was kind of excited about that. I will send out the LSVT Loud website. On there, there's like some tutorials and information from a patient who went through the therapy, which I thought was really cool to hear. And I also found a video of a woman who is communicating before therapy, during therapy, and then after. And the change is really cool to see. And even though she's thinking loud and slowing down, she still sounds natural. And I thought that was interesting because I had always expected talking louder to make it seem a little less natural. And that's not really what happened. So I'll send out both of those videos you can watch on your own time. So when we're doing LSVT therapy, the therapist uses loud, intense speech and encourages the patient to follow this module. Your model. You're almost acting like a cheerleader, right? So you want to make sure that you're helping the patient modify their behavior, which results in that increased loudness. We know that when we increase our loudness, that's going to increase over articulation and decrease our rate of speech. So all three things that we're trying to achieve for therapy have now been checked off with that treatment, right? You start first with ah and holding it. I also have a video of that beginning therapy. I just think it's so interesting and a great way to see what this looks like. So I'll send out that one as well. So the other ways that we can do behavior modification is through a metronome. Metronome is a little thing, right? You can use this on an app. You can use it in real life. You can use it on a maybe YouTube. I'm going to guess there's a YouTube video of a metronome somewhere, right? And what that does is it teaches pacing and it has a delayed auditory feedback. It helps control the rate of speech. It can be, or sorry, a metronome pacing would be your tick tick. And then you can also use like headphones or a hearing aid in order to get auditory feedback. That also can help you slow down the rate of your speech as well. And then the last one is biofeedback, which is a visual representation. This is one I use in my autism classroom, and I think is kind of fun. So I was just going to show. So these are bouncing balls. So if I'm doing this with someone who is, let's see, there we go. So if I'm doing this with a kid, right, this is going to be a little more exciting than doing a typical voice meter on your phone or something that's a little less visual. This is one that I put on in the classroom, and I'll actually put lines right next to the smart board to say like, okay, this is our whispered voice. This is what the classroom sounds like when we're whispering. This is what the classroom sounds like when we're talking with a peer. This is what the classroom sounds like when I am about to yell at you, right? So we talk about that volume there. I just wanted to show another fun way to have a visual representation of volume overall. So yeah, it's overall you're teaching people with that biofeedback, teaching them to speak at a certain level of volume to make a habit to naturally speak at that volume. So we're really forming good, strong habits within our behavior modification, right? We're modifying our behavior by creating strong habits. That's our first way. Second way that we talk about is prosthetic devices. Primarily, we're talking about an artificial device that replaces a missing or impaired part of speech. When we're talking about dysarthria, commonly we're going to be talking about the velum, right? Now, think about if you're losing control of that velum and it's down, all of your air is then escaping through your nasal passage, right? So we're going to have a very hyper nasal speech pattern. And then also your velar speech sounds, which are your k and your g, they're going to be harder to produce as well because you're relying on that velum that is no longer working like a typical person's velum, right? So with that, you can have two different types. There's one that's surgical, implanted, it's there all the time. The other one looks a lot like the retainer you had if you had braces when you were much younger. So like what I had my retainer the late 90s, and you had that one that you got to pick out the color of it and it went up in your mouth, and there was that really cool bar that went across that made your speech go a little at the same time too. I know everyone who had one knows exactly, and I'm sure you could also like almost taste it, right? So that is a prosthetic device. It's going to look a lot like that, and it helps elevate that velum in order to let you produce more speech that is less nasally and also have that k and g sound in there. Um, and your goal with your prosthetic device, like I said, is to close off the velum in order to allow for speech. Um, the last one that we talk about is assistive technology. Now, when we're talking about assistive technology, we have to understand if there is a severe or progressive disease, right? So if it is progressive and you know the person is going to end up losing ability to use their limbs, we then are going to not only train to use the device right now when they have that movement, but also when they no longer have it, right? So technology is amazing. The devices that are available and accessible through multiple modalities is so interesting. One of the things is eye gaze. So with that eye gaze, if you're looking at one of the buttons on a device, it selects it based on how long you're looking at that button. So cool, right? And understanding that using a device uses a lot of manual dexterity, right? You have to isolate one finger. You have to touch small boxes if it's going to fit the needs of a fully functioning adult, right? Because there's a lot of communication there that's necessary. There's other ways as well. I've seen it where someone can wear a headband and there's a long stick off the headband and they're taught how to move their head in order to touch those things on the device. Really cool. So there's a lot of different options with that AAC um, that range from different ways. It's as simple as a communication board. So just to print it out, you could do a communication board with like simple foods that the person likes, right? And let's say they are a snacker like my husband. I'm going to have a picture of peanuts on there, maybe like just the label from his favorite can of peanuts. I would have some Cheetos on there, some sour cream and onion chips, because those are his go tos, right? And then I would have it available so he could look at those or touch which one he wants in those times where he's not able to communicate. Um, or your client isn't able to communicate to, right? So you can have it as simple as that. You can have it as a mid tech, right, where you see a lot of buttons. These are like single voice output buttons that you're programming. You can have multiple buttons. You can do high tech where it has like symbols and you're touching those symbols. AAC is incredible, right? But the biggest thing that you have to remember is it has to work for your client. It has to work for your client's communication partners as well. So for an example, I have a cousin. She is mid 40s now. She has cerebral palsy, and she is not able to verbally communicate. Now, I will tell you, she is incredibly intelligent, right? She is so smart, but it's very hard for others to communicate with her. Knowing that she is around 45 when she first got her communication device, it's on her wheelchair, it's mounted, and it's not a device. It's a board, and it's just a spelling board. You really have to understand how to communicate with her for that to work. So when I went to school to become an SLP, I was like, hey, look at all this cool technology. Let's start doing it. And we tried some. She was miserable. She was so upset because she had this great way to communicate that the people around her already knew she was comfortable with. Her boyfriend, now husband, knew how to communicate with her. So all of her important people already knew how to communicate. She was not having it. Nope, not for me. Now her boyfriend, now husband, loved it. He took it and he started using it, right? So I think it's really interesting that it's not all AAC is for every person. You really have to individualize your care. And remembering that afterwards, our job is not to just teach this one person how to use the device, it's to teach everyone around them how to use the device as well, or the communication technique, the alternative communication mode. Um, so yeah, that's the assistive technology piece of it. Pretty simple overall this week, but I think the thing that you really want to think about is that there is treatment, and you want to make sure that you're understanding that you're dealing with a neurological impairment. So you're not fixing, you're making things easier. You're doing compensatory things and modifying behaviors in order to allow someone to communicate. And remembering that this is important. And it's important to include their family members and other people in that, and to just consider their opinions too, um, as well as the client's opinion, and what works for them. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm here for it. Thank you.